When I came back home for the first time in months, I discovered that the house filled with memories of my childhood was being put up for sale. Since you always encouraged me to follow my own path, I did just that exactly as I pleased. If there's compensation required, you should be the one to cover it. After all, it's your house. This is my way of getting back at you for constantly belittling me because of my financial status. Go to hell. My husband Ken and my mother-in-law Lisa, both of whom came from modest backgrounds, sold the house without my consent while I was away. They profited from the sale and intentionally breached the contract, mocking me, the rightful owner, and making me responsible for the compensation resulting from their actions. They were completely unaware of the consequences their selfishness would bring. Their actions not only disregarded my feelings but also disrespected my parents. I can never forgive them for this. I have to cover the costs because it's my house. You better settle up quickly. If you insist, then this house is no longer mine. And as for Ken and Lisa, they'll face the consequences of their actions. I've been married to Ken for 10 years. We've known each other since childhood and have been together since we were young. We're in a marriage where my socioeconomic status is considerably higher than Ken's. I come from a family of business owners and have always enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle. Ken, on the other hand, was raised in a single-parent household and didn't have the same financial stability. Despite this, my parents and I were drawn to Ken's character, so his background never concerned us. In fact, my parents have always treated him like their own son. My parents decided to move into another property my father owns to enjoy their retirement, so we now live in the house where my parents used to reside. This was part of their plan to support us as much as they could. We need to officially transfer the ownership of the house soon. Once that's done, you'll have full control over it. I assume you're planning to move at some point. Perhaps you could use the funds for that. A few months ago, my father informed me that he intended to give me the family home. Although the house was well maintained and perfectly livable, it was too large for us since we'd chosen not to have children. I expressed my gratitude to my parents, and even though the ownership transfer wasn't complete yet, I began coordinating with the real estate company. Hey Ken, I need you to fill out this form. If I don't submit it today, we'll miss the deadline. How can we sell the house without this? I'll just write it down then. You're overreacting. If you submit it today, you'll meet the deadline. You don't need to remind me every single time, just handle it on your own. Where did his kind and sincere personality go? Since our marriage, Ken has become increasingly lazy and has left everything up to me. He routinely asks me to handle important documents on his behalf. If I refuse, I end up creating problems for the family, so I usually end up doing it myself to keep things running smoothly. I wonder if he'll continue to treat me like a servant. We decided to sell the house we're currently living in and have selected a new place that will be better for us. But I've been anxious about the future of our marriage with Ken and whether this decision is the right one. Then, one day, I received a call that my parents had been seriously injured in a car accident. I rushed to the hospital to be with them. While my parents survived, they were facing a 6-month recovery period and would need support for about 3 months. I need to ask Ken. I'll also check with my company to see if I can adjust my work schedule. I'll be the one to support them. I asked my husband if I could stay with my parents for an extended period to help them. He responded with a casual, "It's okay, it's your thing," and agreed without much concern, which felt more like indifference than genuine worry for my parents. Anyway, I could go and support my parents now. But then another concern crossed my mind. Would Ken be able to manage on his own while I'm away? Ken is the type of person who can't handle house chores. He might be able to feed himself, but washing his own clothes or remembering to take out the trash is beyond him. I definitely don't want our house turning into a mess. I was a bit hesitant, but I decided to explain the situation to my mother-in-law, Lisa, and ask for her help with Ken. Please feel free to use anything and do whatever you need around the house, I told her. Oh my, you're really in a tough spot, aren't you, Mary? I'm sure your parents have enough funds to hire someone to help them. Or are you just missing your own parents? Lisa said with a hint of sarcasm. Don't worry, I'll take good care of my son. You can stay as long as you need, even longer than 3 months if necessary. Lisa clearly loves Ken very much and probably resents me for taking her son away. I was uncomfortable with her sarcastic remarks during our conversations, but I thanked her while keeping my frustration in check, knowing she was my only option for support at the moment. I gathered what I needed and headed to my parents' place. Every day was a whirlwind, and 3 months flew by. I wasn't able to stay in touch with Ken as often as I'd hoped. But it was worth it. My parents were improving day by day. Once the recovery was in a stable place, I was ready to return home. I got into the car and drove back, leaving the natural beauty of the town behind. As I approached the familiar landscape, I finally arrived home. But the house was no longer what I remembered. A for sale sign was posted out front, and the real estate agency listed on the sign was unfamiliar to me. What's going on? Panicking, I called Ken. On the other end of the line, Ken let out a snort of laughter, almost as if he were mocking me. I sold the house and moved back to my parents' place. I did everything for you while you were away, he said. I couldn't make sense of Ken's words, so I went straight to my in-laws' house to get an explanation. When I arrived at my in-laws' home, which was just a 5-minute drive away, the first thing I noticed was a pile of my personal belongings stacked up at the front door. I was shocked and confused. "Excuse me, I'm just passing through," I said. A contractor who had been behind me rang the doorbell, exchanged some paperwork with Lisa, and then loaded my belongings into his truck before driving off. Shortly after, Ken emerged from the house. Both Lisa and Ken looked pleased as they counted the money they had received from the contractor. They were dressed in fancy clothes, and their car had been replaced with a luxury model. I barely recognized them. "Hey Lisa, what's going on?" I confronted her, my panic evident. "What are you talking about?" Lisa replied dismissively. "I cleared out your stuff from the house. You bought all that unnecessary junk. I guess daughters like you just don't know how to take care of your own belongings, probably because you've always had everything handed to you." She continued with a scornful tone, "You're such an unfit wife for prioritizing your parents over your own husband for so long. I pity Ken for having a wife like you. That's why I even suggested he divorce you. Since the house is now in your name, I decided to claim it as alimony." Lisa flashed a smug smile and added, "I found a real estate company willing to pay a very good price, so I sold it quickly. You always told me I could do whatever I wanted, so I did just that." She then showed me the contract she had with a real estate company, which was dated about a month ago. But that house should have already been under contract with another agency, right? And any contract regarding the house without my signature would be invalid. Lisa's condescension was evident as she explained the situation. "You went ahead and made a contract without informing me, so now there will be consequences, and they'll demand compensation." I panicked and tried to explain to Lisa the potential repercussions of her actions. "But I already heard from Ken that you signed a contract with another real estate agency without even consulting him," I said. "That's not my concern," Lisa replied dismissively. "I just did what you did, handled things on my own. I don't care who signed the contract or what's involved, it's your usual approach, right? So if compensation needs to be paid, it's your responsibility. It's your house." She shrugged, clearly believing Ken's version of the story, which was presented from a victimized perspective. I realized there was nothing more I could say to Lisa, so I turned to Ken, hoping for some support. To my shock, Ken was staring at me with the same sarcastic smile as Lisa. Finally, the day had come. This was his revenge. "You've always mocked me for being poor, haven't you?" I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I'm the only one in the family who lived by different standards and values. You and your parents must have found that amusing. I've always felt miserable with you. If you find poverty so amusing, then I'll show you what money can do. I won't accept that you're the only one who gets to live comfortably. Go to hell." Ken, filled with resentment, slapped the divorce papers in front of me. They were all signed except for my signature. I considered having my mother handle everything, but I wanted my revenge to be complete. What a dramatic turn of events, I thought. This is quite the scene. The young lady who mocked the poor is now being put in her place. There's no one here to bail you out now. What are you going to do about it? Ken and Lisa seemed to revel in their satisfaction, clearly excited about what they had done. But my frustration with them eventually turned into a calm realization. They were making a grave mistake. "Sorry to interrupt your little celebration," I said, "but this house isn't mine. You're the ones heading to hell." I decided it was time to reveal the truth. There was no longer any reason to protect them. I pulled a document from my bag and held it up for them to see. "This is the official registry for the house. As I mentioned during our phone call, the ownership has been transferred to Ken's name. The process was delayed due to my parents' accident, but the transfer was completed just a week ago. right around the time you both decided to sell the house. Ken and Lisa looked at each other in confusion. "Oh, I didn't hear anything about this," Lisa said. "Of course you didn't," I replied. "I tried to confirm with you if I should send the paperwork, but you just dismissed me and told me to handle it. You probably don't even remember, but I double-checked with you to make sure everything was okay." Ken stared at the registry document, clearly in disbelief. "Be careful," he warned. Lisa, equally shocked, confronted me. "What's the meaning of this?" I took a deep breath. This was my parents' wish. They always treated Ken like their own son and respected you, Lisa, for raising such a wonderful man. When they decided to give us the house, they believed Ken would always take good care of me. And it was also a gesture of appreciation for you, Lisa, for all the effort you put into raising him. And yet you not only betrayed me but also disrespected my parents' sincere feelings. Ken and Lisa went pale as they absorbed my parents' true feelings. Their hands, which had been covering their mouths, were trembling. As I mentioned earlier, the situation will involve both real estate agencies. Expect that they will demand a substantial amount in compensation. I will contact the agency I originally worked with, I continued. Could you both please get in touch with the agency you used for the sale? I still can't believe that agency accepted your sloppy explanations and signed the contract, I added, growing more assertive. If you have a problem, don't act like scum. Speak up earlier rather than making a mess of things. It's not that you're poor because of money, you're poor in spirit. My tone grew firmer as I accused them loudly. I was about to pull out my cell phone to call the real estate agency when Ken suddenly interjected. Wait a minute. This isn't what I wanted," Ken said, panic evident in his voice. "I was just upset because you left me. Let's work this out together as a couple." He continued, "I could buy the house that's on the market now, and we could call the old real estate agency to make this whole thing disappear. You have the means to do that, don't you? Please?" Ken, who had been siding with Lisa, was now desperately trying to reconcile with me. His attempts to soothe the situation were evident, but he seemed oblivious to how self-serving and insincere his approach sounded. "Ken, are you betraying me now?" I demanded. "I made all the arrangements for you, and now you're abandoning your own mother to put your wife first. What a heartless son." I turned to Lisa. "From what you said earlier, it's scum-like to prioritize parents, right? So you're lucky Ken isn't scum. You should be grateful he's a good son." Lisa looked indignant at Ken's actions but seemed to realize that her own words had backfired. She was left speechless. "That's right," Ken said, attempting to placate me. "You're the most important person to me right now, Mary. I'm going to change my attitude and do my best." I cut him off. "Don't misunderstand. No one's talking about forgiving you." Ken, relieved that Lisa had been silenced, reached out to take my hand. I pulled it away and glared at him coldly. "I'm already fed up with your laziness," I said sharply. "And when things go wrong, you always blame others. You leave others to handle your problems. How can I trust you to change?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Let me be clear, I'm not your secretary or your servant. If you're an adult, you should at least take responsibility for your actions," I said firmly. "You and Lisa will pay for this for the rest of your lives." With that, I snatched the divorce papers from Ken's hand, stamped my signature on the spot, and left them both in shock. Despite some complications, the divorce from my ex-husband was successfully finalized. Ken and Lisa tried to sue my family, claiming we had deceived them and were responsible for compensation. Naturally, they lost. As expected, they are now liable for compensation from both real estate agencies and are facing a substantial financial burden due to their malicious actions. On top of that, they seem to be blaming each other for their troubles. It looks like they'll be in a dire situation for a long time. Meanwhile, my company arranged for me to continue working remotely so I could support my parents. I moved back to their place and resumed helping them while working from home. "Honey, your bath is ready," I called out. "Thank you," my mother replied. "I'll wash the dishes so you can get in the bath first today. You must be tired after your rehab session." "Actually, you should get in first, Mary," my father said. "I'll join later. I also want to clean the bathtub, so you should relax while I take care of that." My parents are still undergoing rehabilitation from the accident, but they continue to support each other and enjoy their time together. Living with them again has been heartwarming. Watching them in their enduring harmony has made me reflect on my past marriage with Ken. I realized that what was missing in that relationship was mutual respect and consideration. There were certainly things I could have done to be more considerate, but looking back, I don't believe Ken and Lisa ever had those feelings for me. Initially, I felt quite sad and frustrated about the divorce. But now I can say with confidence that it was for the best. If I ever meet someone again, I'll need to be extremely cautious. I hope never to cause my mom and dad any more worry. I've decided to take the lessons learned from the ordeal with Ken and Lisa and apply them to the rest of my life. I will always remember to thank my parents and never forget their support as I start my new life in a new place.